Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. Today we're tackling one of the toughest operational challenges in biopharma manufacturing. How do you produce and deliver a drug that decays within hours? Radiopharmaceuticals offer extraordinary promise to patients, but the logistics are unlike anything in traditional pharma. You're racing against radioactive decay, coordinating specialised facilities and building supply chains where every minute counts. So, joining me today is Kostja Paschalidis, who is co-founder and head of systems and logistics at Firm. And we're going to talk about some of these challenges that companies face when they're trying to scale life-changing therapies from clinical trials all the way through to patients. Kostja, welcome to the podcast today.
It's very nice to be here.
You too. Could you give us a brief description of what radiopharma is, please?
So radiopharma is a little bit overall term for pharmaceuticals that are working with radiation. There is a new type of radiopharmaceutical therapies for cancer, there is different terminologies for them that exist currently, but it's basically targeted radiation. What it means is that you are finding the right molecule that can attach to the protein connected to the cancer cell and then deliver the radiation directly to the cancer cell to destroy it directly, which results that it's a very different type of radiation. You can do much more targeted, you can destroy the cell without doing a lot of other damage in the surrounding areas.
Rather than flooding the body with traditional chemotherapy, being able to pinpoint with exact accuracy where the payload is delivered.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why they're so difficult to deliver, because it's targeted, right? The half-life has to be much smaller in order for you to deliver it. It cannot be longer anymore because now you're going for targeting, going inside the bloodstream. So you get the radioisotopes that have much shorter half-life but are very good at destroying the cancer cells.
To begin with, it'd be great to talk a bit about Firm. What did you do and how do you support radiopharma biotechs?
So we are a design consultancy. We design services and build the capabilities that enable pharmaceutical companies to deliver advanced therapies at scale. And currently we are specialized in radiopharmaceuticals. And what happened is that we worked before together with my two co-founders, Estelle and Molly, in one of the leading products for radiopharmaceuticals. And as we were working for it, we realized that this is a huge change in the pharmaceutical industry because of its made-to-order logic that exists there. Normally, pharmaceutical companies, they develop the drug, and as they develop the drug, afterwards, when it's past the FDA approval, the process is very straightforward. The logistics already exist. There is manufacturing companies that they can outsource to manufacture things. There is companies who's going to send it. There is pharmacies and hospitals who's going to store it because of the long shelf life. However, in the case of radiopharmaceuticals, because of the short decay, as you mentioned before, it means that it has to be produced per patient, made to order. And that makes a whole change in the industry, because from being a marketing company after, the product becomes approved, pharmaceutical companies have to become service providers. They're responsible to deliver the drug. They're responsible to find the people who are going to be instituted, to create the hospitals on how to instigate these therapies because they're new. There is a lot of practical change that needs to be changed, and it changes the whole nature of them. So when we saw that and we saw the size of the market and that nobody actually targets this specific problem, we felt like we can support companies specifically around building these services and changing themselves internally to provide therapies to the patients.
I mean, it's a very specific niche you've got, isn't it? Being a design consultancy that's purely focused on radiopharma. You touched on how that came about, but I mean, what do you see your role being in that ecosystem as you explained it?
Companies are going through a huge transformation in order to deliver this. They have to become service-centric organizations, and they have to coordinate. And it's not only about the pharmaceutical companies as well, it's also about the CMDOs and everybody else around the ecosystem that have to provide a real service to their customers. And to do that, it's an integration of their operations. And the things that they're doing is their supply chain and the logistics are going to be operating. And it is also tech, right? On top of building the service, customer support, interacting with their customers, and all the other things they have to do. That part, that specific part, this transformation and this coordination of the organization is this where we are supporting them. We are helping them design the services, build the tech infrastructure required, and optimize their logistics in order to deliver these therapies on time.
How would you describe the current state of radiopharma? We always see announcements about radiopharma biotechs who are emerging. It'd be good to understand from your perspective what the overall size of the market is, the growth drivers. How do you see the market shaping?
So the market is getting very big. Currently, Novartis is leading the market. They have two therapies that have been approved, Pluvicto and Lutathera. Pluvicto is I think 1.7 billion yearly revenue, and I think Lutathera is around 700 million. And this is all keep growing, right? They still keep growing because penetrating the market takes a lot of time. At the same time, there is a lot of acquisitions have happened. Lilly has made an acquisition, MBS has made an acquisition, AstraZeneca has made an acquisition. So there is a lot of players that's going to come to the market. And if we did a research and we analyze all the clinical trials that exist currently, there is 437 active clinical trials in radiopharmaceuticals.
Wow.
There is 100 companies who are developing radiopharmaceuticals today. And the space is going to keep growing because the results that came from Pluvicto and from Lutathera are incredibly good. And because it's a platform, meaning that they can do it for multiple different cancer treatments and cancers, it's going to keep growing, keep optimizing. There is also different ways you can do that. There is the alpha therapies and there is the beta therapies. Currently, we have beta therapies. Alpha therapies are going to come in, which is have a little bit shorter. They're much more accurate and do less damage in the tissue. So the space is just like at the very infancy, we think, and it's going to grow quite a lot. Additionally, it's going to have a very good coordination with gene therapy. So we think that in the future, in the next 10 years, that's going to be the main way that cancer treatment is going to be targeted across.
It does feel like there are lots of similarities between the stage that radiopharma's at and cell and gene therapy. Is it the same infrastructure which both approaches could benefit from?
It's very, very similar. They're both made to order. I guess the cell and gene are a little bit more complicated because you need to target the drug specifically to the patient, while in radiopharmaceuticals, it's just about the time of infusion. However, even that is going to change in radiopharmaceuticals as well. We're going to have more targeted radiation dependence on the specific patient. What seems to be the case, and what is the most interesting thing around both of these therapies, is that clinically it seems to be the case that the combination of them work very well, because pharmaceuticals are very good at destroying the cancer, and cell and gene therapy are really good to make sure that the cancer doesn't reappear. So a combination of them is going to be quite a good thing, and they're very similar in the same problem. They're made to order therapies, which changes the infrastructural problems that you're going to get.
Very interesting. Geographically as well, how do you see that landscape? Would you say that the majority are coming from China, US, Europe? Broadly, how does that shape?
USA is, like in most pharmaceuticals, I guess, like the main revenue driver. I think the gap is quite big with the rest of the world. However, Europe has a lot of strength in the radiopharmaceuticals today. They're offering most of the stuff that are offered in USA. Similarly with China and Japan, this is all big markets. Germany has a long history of the radiopharmaceutical therapies because they had a homebrew industry for quite a long time because of the regulation around end-of-life treatment. There is also countries like Brazil, which is going to be up and coming. And in general, like every complex therapy, at first it comes to the market that have the most amount of revenue, and then slowly, steadily starts migrating and going further. Yep. But we can see clear expansion happening. And from what we've seen, the access currently is predominantly in USA, Europe, and Japan, and China predominantly, but we can see that's going to be changing soon, or hope.
I guess we're talking about the scale-up challenge. It's one thing to have companies at clinical trials in very, very small control groups, controlled dosage, to a commercial launch. What are those big design operational challenges as you go from clinical trials up to a commercial launch?
I think one of the reasons why I'm personally really obsessed with this industry is because the challenges are everywhere across. Yeah. It's one of the most complex logistical problems that exist right now in pharmaceuticals and ever exist in pharmaceuticals, I believe personally. You're having, when it comes to radiopharmaceuticals, you have to radiate the radioisotope, right? So that's a process by itself. You need to use a regenerator or a cyclotron, depends on what radioisotope you are using. And that takes a lot of time from preparation, from prediction of how much you're going to use it and how you're going to be predicting it. Afterwards, you need to take that radioisotope and then do radio labeling. When you connect it with the molecule so that they attach together. In a very practical sense, what's happening is that you're having the cell produces a specific type of protein. In cancer cells, there is specific proteins connected with, for example, the prostate cancer has a lot of overexposure of a PSMA protein. For that protein, you find a molecule that can attach to it. On top of the molecule, you put in a net, if that makes sense. Okay. It's a net, right? So it's kind of sits like that. So you throw the radioactive atom, right, which is active, it's a heavy atom. You spin it around, the net captures it, and then you infuse it into the patient, and then it goes through the bloodstream, and when it finds the protein, it's attached to the protein, and now it's radiating around the cell, so it destroys the cell. That's kind of like the process for it and how to do that. And in order for you to get this thing in time for the patient within the specific time of infusion and a manufacturing time of 5 days before the infusion, it creates a lot of logistical problems, from collecting the radioisotope to doing the radiolabeling to delivering. But that's just like one part of the problem. There is a whole other section that exists. As I have said before, these cells have a protein, but not everybody who has a cancer cell is going to have enough of the PSMA protein to be eligible for the treatment, or they might have the same protein in other areas that might make a damage to them. As a result, before you be able to do as a patient the treatment, you need to do first an eligibility test, where it's very similar compound, but rather than having a heavy atom, you have an atom that radiates, and you can see it in the scan. So you have to go through diagnosis. After you've been eligible for diagnosis, then you can do the treatment. And this whole process creates a very complicated as well patient journey to identify the patient, to find that there's also patients who are end of life. So waiting time is very important to them. This is cancer treatment as fast as possible is the most important factor in the equation. So you need to go through this complicated journey for the patient, complicated journey from the logistics, and try to do it as fast as possible. And companies even today doing it already really fast. I think this is like 5 days before the infusion, which is great, but we need to reduce the time even more, I think.
Who's doing it well? You mentioned there are some pretty big players in this space now. Novartis, who you've worked with previously, Lilly, AstraZeneca, BMS. Is there emerging best practice in how to make logistics, supply chains work in time?
Currently, the logistics of that is always seen at scale, right? If you're having clinical trials, it's very easy to predict this stuff. You have a clinical trials assigned to a specific day. The logistics are a little bit easier. And if you have to do 200 doses, is not that much, right, over a time of spectrum. When it becomes really difficult is when the amount of doses you have to produce is quite big. And we have an example of Xofigo before, which they did it quite well. However, because they were not using lutetium, the production was a little bit easier, and the logistical problems were much easier for Xofigo than it is for lutetium-based therapies. And the only other example we have today is Novartis. There is no other example currently who have an approved therapy in order for you to see what the logistics done. Novartis have started, and they have some hurdles, but today they're operating super well. In USA, I think the order time is 5 days. And before the infusion, they're delivering most of the doses on time, something like extremely well, like I think like 99% or something like that. Crazy.
Wow. How do they do it so well?
I think Novartis is a very competent organization. They have done a lot of work in the field. They have invested, they pioneered the field as well in many ways, and they're investing a lot of that. They saw it earlier than everybody else. They bought AAA. I cannot remember the full name of the company that they bought before everybody. And they've been doing it for quite some time. Lutathera now is going to become generic. So they've been doing a lot of time. So they have time to figure out all the problems. And because they started with Lutathera, which was for more rare cancers, they had a little bit more leeway because it was less. So then on the transition to Pluvicto, and while there were some hurdles at the beginning, they managed to overcome them, which is where the real test is the scale part. I guess it's like investment and understanding that this is a service and they have to provide the service as an organization. I think.
Sure. And then when it comes to the partners in the ecosystem to support them, so CDMOs, there's a number of them who specialize in radiopharma. How's that working, would you say? What are those key roles that CDMOs can play in supporting a biotech or indeed a big pharma company through that scale-up process?
There is different places where CMDMOs can support, and it depends on the type of approach an organization is going to have. For example, this company called ITM, and they are producing lutetium, right? They're also going to have radiopharmaceuticals soon in the world as well. They're going to have one of the competitors to Lutathera, but they're producing lutetium, right? And so sourcing lutetium is one of the things that you can provide. Is you irradiate it, you send it to them, and then they're getting it, right? On the other end, it's also providing manufacturing support. Not every pharmaceutical company will be able to have manufacturing in place. They might outsource the manufacturing, so that's another aspect, and then also the logistics part. And they play a huge role into the whole thing because it is very, very difficult for a single organization to do all these aspect of the production together well. And on top of that, it becomes even more important when you're going to be dealing with the smaller players. because then you can provide to them technical support, provide them the ordering platform, provide them other aspects of it as well as a collective service in order to make it easier. When it comes to, for example, in the USA, there is also much more leeway you can get with when you're working with radiopharmacy, because you can operate under the GMP law, and then you can operate under the radiopharmacy law. When you're operating under the radiopharmacy compound law, you don't have to create each vial targeted to a time of infusion. You can create it overall, and then the radiopharmacy can dispense it. So that gives you a little bit more of a leeway to reduce the time frames and make it a little bit faster for you to make the order, because you can go and predict how much you need to produce, and then the radiopharmacy can assign it to individual patients. So there is multiple different ways that the support can happen and actually improve the whole thing, and also existing infrastructure. And yeah, I don't know, it's quite a huge space, and there is all different angles. Lastly, one of the aspects around CMDOs is that currently we are producing lutetium, but there is a lot of other radioisotope that's going to come to the market. Actinium is very keen that's going to be going there. There is also exploration in future things like astatine. So there is a lot of different radioisotopes, and that support is also needed. It's needed at the beginning to just create the case for it, that like this is possible to deliver it on time with this specific radioisotope, and later down the line to provide them. So the space is quite dynamic, and we'll see how. But the support is across all aspects, I think.
A lot of moving pieces. What's the best way to try and manage that complexity? I mean, if you're a biotech and you want to try to get everything on time to the patient, it sounds like there's various different platforms, different systems which need to speak to each other, providers. I imagine this is a big part of the design job you do when you're working with a client. How do you sort of map that all out? How do you make the systems talk to each other? Oh, and can you?
Yeah, no, it's one of the interesting problems here. The number one thing that the companies need to do is understand that they're becoming a service provider. And this changes all the dynamics. When you're a service provider, you have to have a service-centric model of operations internally. If that is not in place, it's very difficult for you to optimize your services, to build your services. You're not anymore a provider of a therapy, you're not anymore an R&D department. You are now becoming a thing that actually interacts with the customer. So if that change is not happening internally, and if internally from organization, from top down, that understanding is not clear, it becomes very difficult for you to move within the organization.
What does that look like? Becoming a service central model, I guess, in terms of the behaviors, the attitudes, what is it?
First of all, this is just like basic capabilities, right? For example, like having a customer support department, right? And understand that this is integrated, and having your metrics within your organization related to customer experience and less around sales and other mechanisms, because what you are actually providing is customer experience, and that's the differentiation you're having. And it has to do with the way that you're measuring success and what you're operating under. Like how do you measure what is the percentage of what you have been delivered and how things are operating? All your metrics or internal rewards have to change towards the service providing aspects rather than to other things, which before was more around marketing, more around distribution and access to the patients, right? So you're changing the directive of how things are flowing. On top of that, you need to now, as a service provider, also have technology to support you, right?
That sounds like such a shift from the traditional way that pharma companies operate.
It's a huge shift, because this is exactly what we saw, and we were like so fascinated by this, because currently, and I'm not sure this is going to be reflected on most companies, but it's a good kind of like archetype. You have three major departments. You're going to have your R&D department, which is the area where they're exploring and finding new drugs. You have your operational department, which is basically around coordinating your logistical partners, right? Who is going to manufacture it for you, who is going to distribute it for you, who is going to store it, and all these things. But you're not the person who is doing the manufacturing, you're coordinating your partners. And then you have your commercial department, which is basically around sales and marketing. Nowhere here in this structure exists anything around service providing. All your metrics are done very differently. Even when you're treating your therapies, the way that they're seen is that you have a window of 8 years. Within this window of 8 years, you need to sell as much as possible, and you need to start doing it at the very, very beginning. And as the therapy times goes by, the sales de-escalate, and you're moving your people to the next track that comes in, right? And so this is the circle that they're operating. In radiopharmaceuticals, there is not one drug, right? It's a platform. You're going to keep developing more. It's not going to stop soon. Like Lutathera keeps growing, for example, right? And so now you have a very different model, which is not around marketing and selling, it's around the service you provide. And as more players comes in, the only differentiation will be specifically that point, right? So it's a shift of what organizations are. It's very similar to what happened to banking in the 2010, when out of nowhere, all the banking industry has to become product development companies.
Is there a different approach to software and technology to support that? Because traditionally pharma companies, the most important platforms is the ERP, which is sat there. Do you see there being a gap in that more service orientated software?
There's so much gap in there, right? First of all, this is the other aspect of pharmaceuticals, which also connects to the software, is that they're heavily regulated. Every move they're one of the most regulated organizations in the world. So even then, every change you're doing is heavily scrutinizing to make sure that everything is correctly. And same goes for the software. And when we're going to look even at the clinical level, not only at the patient ERP stuff, even at the clinical level, all clinical studies are done based on the concept that the drug has been manufactured. And now we are doing clinical trials, right? So we are tracking the patient and how patient order does. Now your clinical trials need to have an ordering system. That you need to order the thing for your patient. You need to schedule it. You need to put it in time. It has to be in time right infusion. For every drug you're producing, right, you need to have verification of the production of it done. Normally, you produce the drug and all the documents, all the testing has happened in advance. You have it, you can continue going because of shelf life. Now, for each one of them, there is a specific documentation of quality testing for each batch that has been produced that needs to be attached to it. There is a lot of things that are heavily unique to the therapy as well and how they're operating. And this changes all of the aspect. And pharmaceutical companies are not tech savvy. They haven't been built in software. And now they have these unique problems to solve. And nothing in the existing market of all of the services that exist can actually meet these requirements. So it's kind of they kind of have to make it themselves or try to use existing platforms that are not fit for purpose and create a lot of problems. So it's a huge problem. And doing it well plays a huge role as well, because if, for example, you have a company that already has a customer with the site and they already learn how to use their ordering platform, they already learn how to do these things. Now, in order to get the next customer, it's not as simple as convincing a referral to refer to that specific drug. It's also need to convince the site to go through your process, to start using your systems. And every hospital hates systems because all hospital systems are horrible. So to introduce a new system that is not easily used is a big hurdle and might be one of the many major bottlenecks for them to introduce the therapy in their site. And that is also another factor. So not only do you have to create new software, you also have to do it very user-friendly and easy to understand so it doesn't feel like a hurdle to introduce another ordering platform into your system. Is
there any standardization at the moment between the big players as to which approach they use?
There is no standardization. And I think when we are looking at, if I look at the way that the drugs currently are bought, right, all the acquisitions, it actually doesn't look like the market understand yet the implication these services have. They still treat it as normal IP. They look at the size of the therapy that can reach and what is the amount of patients and how much it can be done. And that's how they evaluate it. There is no standardization. Nobody has something. Of course, Novartis has their own proposition of what they're doing forward, but there is nobody who targets this market directly, specifically. So everybody who's going to do something, they're going to have to do it custom made. And it has to be made to that therapy. And everybody's going to rediscover this problem from scratch. And they're all going to have to figure out how to solve this stuff from the beginning. And there is a lot. And I feel that in general, from what we have seen in the market, there is kind of like an expectation that is not that complicated until people get into the problems. And now they start seeing all the unique ways that you have to operate within it, which changes everything. And all the previous software that you have just do not fit the purpose.
Do you think that's an opportunity, like the whole standardization piece? So if pharma were to align themselves a bit better and just go to the hospitals with a single system, a single approach?
This is a very interesting question because the answer is it's very difficult to know because there's going to be some clinical differentiation. An alpha targeted therapy versus beta inhibition is going to be different. And there's going to be some clinical differentiation. There's going to be clinical differentiation across the different type of cancer treatment. But overall, as a platform, is not patentable, right? This is technology. All these ligands exist. You just select the ligand, you attach your radioisotope, you go for clinical trials, and you get access to it. So there is no reason for companies to provide the same experience, because then afterwards, if you don't have the experience part in place, that is better. If your logistics are not better, there is no other differentiator. So it's very difficult to know exactly where the market is going to go. But as every complex market, at some point, when time goes by and when most of the difficulties have been figured out, it gets standardized. So it's going to happen at some point, but I feel like right now the incentives are not there. The incentives is actually the opposite. The incentive for each company to do their own thing, do it better than everybody else, and make it as difficult for others.
Right. Okay.
Right, because it's going to be huge market. Right now in the space of Lutathera, there's going to be the generic that's going to come in. IDM has the products coming, and if you look at them, we have done research. I think there is like 110 clinical trials just around PSMA.
Wow.
So this is just a space that's going to be overcrowded, and you need to compete by experience, I guess. So I don't know.
Given your focus in this space, when you're starting working with a company, do you tend to have like a series of questions or almost a playbook about these are the areas that you need to address? I mean, we've talked about some of them, having that service orientated culture, but what would you say those sort of top 5 questions or areas to consider are?
While there is a lot of areas within the organization that you need to consider, and they're all varied, depends on the organization maturity and their structure and their hierarchy, logic, and how they operate. There is a very clear way to look at it from a patient journey, right? And from a patient journey, there is almost like 3 separate stages, 4 separate stages that exist. There is a stage of site setup. This is what's happening to the customer side. How do you get your site to be able to produce the therapy, right? All the things they need to do in order to be ready for the therapy that they're going to be producing. And then you are having the ordering and the scheduling of the patient. This has to do with the diagnostics. So the patient gets eligible, they go through the diagnostic part, and then you're ordering the therapy for a specific time. Then you have the manufacturing and the logistics. And at the end, you have the during treatment and post-treatment support, right? This is all the additional things that you can do around waste management, because it's also radioactive material. You have to throw away the waste. There's a lot of additional support and service you can do for the customers and for the patients as well to help them through that process. By dividing across these 4 areas, you can start seeing where the gaps are sitting within your organization. And it's going to become very clear that like this area we do not look after. So how do you solve it around that part? What is happening within our logistics? How fast can we deliver? What is your time to treatment? Existing, right? So this is like the 4 major areas, and within there you can start seeing exactly the problems that exist as verticals, I think.
Yeah. So I guess that's that classic customer mindset. Start with the customer and then work back that way.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the easiest way to understand, because it's organizationally like there is just simple things like, for example, how do you prepare for an FDA inspection, right? Normally is everybody has a blueprint. There is the FDA inspection. This is the list. This is the tick box. That's how it needs to be operating. When it comes to these things, now they're the service provider. It changes all the game and all the logic. Now you have to keep track of all the doses you're producing and all the quality assurance that has happened. Where do you do it? So what do you show to the inspector? And I think a lot of the things that Novartis also did at the beginning, when they had to kind of overcome some of these hurdles by getting their sites, everyone has to do it, but there is no blueprint for that. So in every aspect across the organization, you're just going to encounter something new that has to be done differently than previously. And you need to figure out how to approach to it. So having some kind of a map towards where is the target, what are we trying to achieve, why we are going towards that direction, it helps a lot for you internally to start organizing yourself and changing yourself to things.
As this market matures, what do you think is likely to happen over the next 3 to 5 years, say? What do you think the trajectory is likely to be? Both, I suppose, in terms of the actual approved products, but the underlying support, infrastructure, and how that's likely to mature.
From a clinical standpoint, we can see already the trajectory that's going. I think right now we're going to get in the next 3-5 years, we're going to get 10 more different cancer treatments across the board. And looking at the results from the existing clinical trials and the phase 3 trials that we have, it's all looking really, really promising. And it seems to be the case that it's going to become the prominent treatment for cancer. One of the things, and this is the thing that maybe we haven't discussed, is that this as a therapy is much less painful. Like the comparison between that and everything else that you're going to be doing at that specific point, the gap is so huge in the experience for the patient and the quality of life the patient has. From a quality of life point of view, right, it's not only does it much more effective, it's really, really not that painful, because you get radiation, but it's targeted radiation. It's radiation goes directly to the cancer cell, right? Yes, there is some side effects that you're going to get. It's not like a totally painless treatment, but it's much better for the patient. And that's going to be always the main target, right? It's going to go more efficacy and easier and better quality of life for the patient. So that is the trajectory that's going to come from a clinical standpoint. And from what it looks like as well, they're going to start recombining them with gene therapy and cell therapy, but that is a little bit more suggestive. We're not sure about that. It's just some of the clinical data suggests that. When it comes to the business size and the infrastructural size, it's just going to keep growing because the penetration hasn't happened yet. We see it by the differences from Lutathera and Pluvicto. The market is still growing, and it's going to keep growing because it takes a lot of time to build the infrastructure, to get all the hospitals in place. We are still in the phase of trajectory of just like simple infrastructural existence and learning of the therapy. And as this is going to be progressing, it's going to grow much, much more. And the more players are going to go into and more people are going to encounter these problems, there's going to be a lot of additional support players like CNDOs who's going to try to support the industry. So I hope, maybe not like 3-5 years, but I hope in the next 7 years, we're going to get to the point where it's going to be us taking a pill. Like you come in and then you make an order and the next day for you to do the therapy to make all the logistics super easy for the patient. So it's just going to feel like non-experience, I think. At some point, we're going to get there.
Yeah.
But it's a very promising market, I think.
Bringing it back to what you guys do at Firm, how would you see your own company's services developing over that period of time? Are you still going to be, do you think, at the design stage, or do you feel like what the industry needs is going to change and so what you're going to do is going to change?
This is a difficult question to answer because it has multiple layers to it, right? There is a lot of things here can be standardized. Like you can standardize the development of an ordering platform. You can standardize of additional services that are going to be required. There is a lot of practical things that you can do on how you measure the success of the service and how you are improving upon it. There's like a lot of different things can be standardized and can be provided. When it gets very difficult, it's the integration part. And that integration part is complicated because of the nature of pharmaceutical companies and the fact that they're extremely heavily regulated. So the way that we see the market progressively going and our role playing in that is to provide a set of standardized things that the customer needs so that they don't have to do a lot of investment heavily upfront, because developing anything in-house for pharmaceuticals is going to cost a lot of money because it takes a lot of time to do every small change in every operations. And at the same time, keep supporting them in these internal changes because that support will always going to be needed there. Right? For every change you're going to be doing, for every functionality that you're going to change, for every aspect of the service that you're going to be changing, you're still going to need to be able to know how to coordinate it. And when you have a hyper-specialized agency who understand exactly the type of problems you're having and how to solve them, that's always going to be useful because it's just a form of accelerator, right? When somebody has went through this and they understand what problems you're having, when you come to them and then you accelerate them for overcoming them and you can identify easily what is the problems that exist. So it's a combination of both. We see us having a little bit more standardization in our approach and provide a little bit more maybe like tech infrastructure that's going to be a little bit more ready, but not as a product, more as an infrastructure so that then we can internally organize it within the organization and go through the process of integration as fast as possible. And then providing the capabilities and service building as we're providing them now, because I don't think there is a way to continue working without that part. That part is very useful for organizations.
Absolutely. Kostja, thank you so much for your time today. Really been fascinating speaking to you about this incredibly complicated, but as we've talked about, such an exciting space that you're in.
Thank you so much, Luke. This was really nice.
Thank you.